communication. It's the Talking Biotech podcast. It's biocommunication. It's the Talking Biotech podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Talking Biotech podcast by Collabora. Now, last year, 2024, an event came and went without any fanfare. It was the first genetically engineered plant product, and it was approved back in 1994. So it was the 30-year anniversary of the first genetically engineered plant product. And at the time, this was considered a massive step forward. This was a tomato that had genes installed to resist certain changes with ripening, especially softening. And so it allowed better shipping of a fully ripened tomato, which they thought consumers would really appreciate. But it went over like a lead balloon, and the Flavor Saver genetics, they were introduced into an inferior tomato background. So extending the shelf life of something that wasn't outstanding to begin with wasn't a big step forward. It was truly unfortunate because it really was targeting the consumer. In other words, subsequent genetic innovations would end up being made for farmers, things like insect resistance, that were not necessarily something the consumer would see or value. And sadly, that kind of set the tone for all the critics who said there's no real benefit to these technologies. It just doesn't exist. But recently, this all changed with the introduction of the first genetically engineered tomato made especially for consumers. The big purple tomato, or the purple tomato, was released in 2024 by Norfolk Healthy Produce. And this was an innovation that allowed us to now have gardeners and homeowners and just general consumers have access to a dark purple tomato that was really a game changer. So we're going to talk about that today. We're speaking with Dr. Nathan Pumplin. He's the CEO of Norfolk Healthy Produce. So welcome to the podcast, Nathan.
Thank you, Kevin. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's really cool. I spoke with Dr. Kathy Martin years ago about this, and we looked forward to a day where there actually may be a product that would be available to consumers. And so here we are. So could you tell me how this moved from something that was on paper as just, an innovation, make this the anthocyanin accumulation throughout the tomato, how that, the purple pigment, I should say, for those who don't know plants, it sounded like a solution looking for a problem. So what was the justification to even take on this project?
Yeah, so, let me break that apart. So I am CEO of Norfolk Healthy Produce. It's my role, my job to take this purple tomato from the university, from concept, from scientific breakthrough, out into a product that's readily available to those consumers who really want it. So how did I get into this role? Well, I'm a PhD trained plant geneticist. I've been working in this area for the last 20 years. At that intersection between research development and commercialization and really cultural change. It really has to go all the way. So, what you brought up is it sounded like a solution looking for a problem. Nobody is running around saying, boy, my life is lacking purple tomatoes. That's the one thing that would, save me, make everything better. Actually, we find that's not the case. And it's really interesting when we look at the development of new products in the world, whether it's, new types of cell phones or having the opportunity to do video chats. A lot of people don't know that their lives would be improved by these products until those products come along. And so, the story people often tell, it's apocryphal, is that if Henry Ford asked people what they wanted over 100 years ago, they'd say they want a faster horse, and it's not until you show them the new product and they say, oh, wow, well, that's really cool. Oh, that means you could do this. So you're absolutely right. I've been doing this project for about 3.5 years, and I didn't choose it. It chose me. And we can dive into that more. When I got started and I started telling people, hey, we have this purple tomato. It has the nutrients of blueberries. I think it's really cool. We're going to try to sell it. People said, does anybody really want this? This is a tech push. This is scientists who made something, who are trying to push it out in the world, and nobody wants it. What we know today is that's simply wrong. When I go with a purple tomato and I say, I don't even need to say anything. We have a farmer's market booth here in Davis, California, or I'm at a conference, or I'm walking down the street and I have a basket of tomatoes. People stop me and they say, hey, what is that? What are you holding? What are you carrying? I've never seen something like that before. And I say, oh, it's a purple tomato. And they say, a purple tomato? What the heck is that? I've never heard of it. So I give the story and they say, wow, that's really cool. Okay, I know antioxidants are good for me. I've heard eat the rainbow. I don't eat so many purple things. Boy, okay, I want that. Where can I get it? How can I get it? Tell me more. And so once you have the product and you're able to show it to people, then the curiosity opens up, the interest opens up, questions pour forward, and it's a heck of a lot of fun to talk to people about it. And so, the answer to your question is there are a lot of people who really, really want purple tomatoes, and now we're in the process of meeting them where they are and getting it out into the world.
Oh, very good. Now you said that it found you though, and can you fill us in a little bit more on that?
I was looking for an interesting project about 3.5 years ago, that would be, again, at this intersection of culture, of science, and of business. And I met Eric Ward, who's one of the early founders of Norfolk Plant Sciences, and he said, we have two interesting things with the purple tomato. One, we're about to have a path to get regulatory approval so we can commercialize it. And two, we're about to be on the cover of the New York Times Sunday magazine. And I sort of laughed. I said, I know the purple tomato. I used to teach the original publication to a class. So let me add an aside here. I did my PhD in plant genetics at Cornell. Then I went on to do a postdoc in Zurich. And I was in a lab right next door to where Ingo Petrikis had made golden rice. Ingo Petrikis had retired. There were still people from his lab who were developing the courses. And so one of the classes that I used to teach had a lot of things around nutritional fortification of foods. And Kathy Martin's original publication on the purple tomato is a fantastic piece of science, and it's a fantastic publication to review with students because you go all the way from discovering a gene, putting that's a gene in snapdragons, putting it into tomatoes, seeing what the effect in tomatoes is, and then going all the way to doing a feeding study in cancer-prone mice and showing that purple tomatoes will extend the lifespan of cancer-prone mice by 30%. And so I was very familiar with the science. And when Eric first told me about it, I said, you've got to be kidding. A GMO tomato, there's no way that anyone's going to buy a GMO tomato, bring it out to market. And I was initially resistant to the idea. And the more I thought about it and the more I talked to people, both scientists and people out in the market, excuse me, the more I realized, oh, actually, this is a really, really interesting product. And here's the reason. So you brought up Flavor Saver tomato as one of the first genetically engineered products that got onto the market. And it sounds like it would have benefits to the consumer, right? Consumers want less food waste. They want better tasting food. Okay, here's a tomato with longer shelf life. The problem is it takes a lot of imagination to look at a red tomato that has longer shelf life and believe that it's better. It takes a lot of imagination to say, hey, here's a tomato that's resistant to diseases and it can reduce the use of pesticides. That's something that the average consumer simply, can't grasp onto. And I completely understand that. The magic of the purple tomato is it doesn't take any imagination. You look at it, you say, oh my gosh, this is different. Why is this different? Let's have a conversation about it. And you're having a conversation about reality. You're having conversation about a product that's right in front of you that you can literally sink your teeth into. And so that's sort of when it finally chose me. I thought, okay, this is going to be really cool. And I dipped a toe in and I worked with it part-time for a little bit. And I was blown away by the response that people had to the product. And so that's literally, I loved it so much. I bought into the company, and now it's my full-time job.
Well, that's really cool. When you talk about big response, I can imagine there's a lot of geeks out there like me who were all excited because we like genetic innovations and that there would be a decent amount of response. But how has the response been so far, especially like at the Davis Farmers Market, which tends to be a little crunchy? I've been there. I didn't seem like that would be a place where a purple tomato genetically engineered would go over very well.
Wow. So Kevin, you just put your finger on it. Geneticists believe that a place like the Davis Farmers Market would be resistant to a GMO tomato. And that is the problem. So I'll cut right to the answer. The people who are resistant to biotechnology are biotechnologists. It's one of the huge surprises of this whole project is actually we, scientists, we've all been standing in our own way. It's seed companies, it's plant breeders, it's geneticists who say, "Oh, crunchy people don't like GMOs. They're anti-GMOs." Uh, the universe has moved on. People have moved on, and we are still stuck in the past. We're still stuck in protests against Monsanto from 20 years ago. There are a small fraction of people who are still buying into this. The rest of the world has moved on. It's time for us as scientists, as plant breeders, it's time for us to move on because we're really the only ones, by and large, living in the past. So what happens when we sell GMO tomatoes at the Davis Farmers Market? People come up and they say, "Oh my gosh, I'm glad I got here in time before you sold out. Okay, I want 2 pints." They come up and they say, they're with their friend and they say, "Hey, these are the folks that I've been telling you about. This is the purple tomato. It has the nutrients of blueberries." It is completely different. We have people who come up to the booth and say, "So your tomato is bioengineered. Is that what do you call it? Is that a GMO?" I say, "Yes, it's what people usually call a GMO." They say, "Well, isn't that supposed to be bad for me? I've heard that it's bad for me." I say, "Well, let's talk about the science. Let's talk about what it means to have genes from Snapdragon added to this tomato." And they say, "Okay, does it have pesticides? I always heard GMOs have pesticides." I say, no, it doesn't have pesticides. It just has these nutrients." They say, "Well, does it cause cancer?" I say, "Well, in mice, we've shown that it reduces cancer and it extends the life of cancer-prone mice." They say, "Wow, that's really interesting. Well, do you grow it organically? Because I want things grown organically." And I say, "Well, actually, most of the time we use entirely organic inputs. We do use inorganic fertilizers because we're growing in a greenhouse." And usually we go into this whole conversation about production methods.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is these people who, Kevin, you would expect are anti-GMO, they're hippies. They say, "Hey, I really like this. I want to buy it." And they'll hang out for 30 minutes and they'll ask a bunch of questions. They're very curious and they're very interested in it. And this is a conversation that we couldn't have unless we have a product. Otherwise it's all theoretical. It's this weird science stuff. We're having a conversation around this really interesting product that's there. So let me give you a few other factoids that are really important. We started selling tomatoes in grocery stores. We were in Lidl, Food Lion, and Food City in the Mid-Atlantic. We sold over 100,000 clamshells of purple tomatoes. This is a huge number in our test market season, and we did it with a fantastic partner called Red Sun Farms, and we're doing it again this year as well. We sold seeds to home gardeners. We did it direct through our website, and when we announced the seed sales, we had a nationwide article on NPR. So we were on the radio, we were on All Things Considered, and when we did that, the most telling thing is I talked to the NPR reporter, and she said, "We put this on our Facebook page. We actually promoted it twice." And she said, "We were all really nervous. Our editors said, okay, get ready. There's going to be backlash. There's this big controversy. People are going to be sending us hate mail." She said, "First of all, we had massive engagement on the story, way more than usual stories. And it was overwhelmingly positive. 90% of the comments were, 'Hey, this is fantastic. We're so excited. Finally, science is getting out there. I'm really excited about this product.'" And this is just a really clear example that there's a perception that other people don't want this technology. I'm fine with it. I'm worried that other people don't want it. And it's by and large a boogeyman. It's really not out there. And we had to be a little bit brave. We had to go out on a limb. We had to bring the product out to market and just ask, hey, who would like this? Would people like it? And it turns out that the majority of people in the US want products like this.
Okay, so how much of that educational aspect was intended? I mean, was that because we're going to make purple tomatoes? Was it really to strive for something that would show a health benefit, and then they found the health benefit, and then said, okay, we got to market this to people, or was it kind of a let's use this as a vehicle for education because it opens itself up for that?
It's a little bit of both. The reality is, if you put a flavor saver tomato out on the market and you put other, there's other products that have been improved with biotechnology, whether that's traditional genetic engineering or whether that's CRISPR gene editing. Um, I take a step back and I just watch what gets covered. And when there's conversations, what are the conversations that people have around products? And what's very clear is the purple tomato rises to the top because it's so different. People pay attention to it, and there's a logical benefit. So we did consumer research. We talked to 400 average people throughout the US, presented them the product concept, and said, would you like this? Over 80% said, yes, I want the purple tomato, knowing full well that it's bioengineered. And then you ask them, well, why do you want it? What's the driver? And the overwhelming answer is the nutritional benefit, right?
Okay.
So there's a logical reason. I'm trying to take care of my body. I'm trying to care for my family. These are really important nutrients that improve our health. And so I want to go for this product because it has this tangible, logical benefit. At the same time, it's sexy. It's a beautiful product. It draws you in with emotional appeal. You say, wow, that is so cool. It's really interesting. It's really beautiful. I can make a caprese salad. I can make a ceviche dish, which I made for friends yesterday. Boy, that's really going to pop. And people are going to say, how did you make this beautiful thing? What are those things? Boy, I've never seen contrast like this in a dish. And so it has that logical benefit that it's good for you. And it also has that irrational emotional draw of this is beautiful. I really want this. And then on top of that, it has this whole taboo, interesting frontier of science discussion of, hey, people thought GMOs are bad, and here's this product that it seems like it's good. I don't know what to think. All of a sudden I've got to think. All of a sudden I've got to say, well, why did I think GMOs are bad? And is this actually good? And oh my gosh, I'm shaken up out of this. Well, we always know it's this way. And now we have an interesting conversation and an interesting discussion. And so those are sort of the three legs of the stool that really makes the purple tomato work. And so yes, it's a piece of education. It is a legitimate product that delivers benefits in health to people, and it's just something that's really fun and light and sexy and interesting.
No, very good. And I guess it's nice that we can always deal with education and informing the consumer and maybe make some inroads there. But the government's a little bit different. And when you look at regulatory around genetic engineering and you talk to the folks from Arctic Apple, you talk to the folks from Simplot about the white russet potato, and they talk about these onerous regulatory mazes they need to navigate in order to bring this to market. But now here you are mailing transgenic seeds to people. And what kind of regulatory issues are there around that?
Well, so the immediate answer is with our seeds, there's no regulatory issues. So we have completed the regulatory process that's needed in the US to bring the product to market. So we've completed the USDA process. And as a lot of your listeners probably know, this means it's a non-regulated item. The way this works is if you make a genetically engineered plant, this is subject to certain regulations. You can't just grow it out into a field willy-nilly. You need to grow it under containment. So this is at a university facility, at a commercial facility where nothing can get out into the outside environment. This allows you to develop a product, bring together a big data package. This then goes for review. So what the USDA determined is, okay, our tomato isn't subject to any regulations beyond a normal tomato. So we can grow it like a normal tomato. We can deliver it like a normal tomato. We also completed the FDA's biotechnology notification file process, where they determined this tomato doesn't present any risks that are different from any other kind of tomato. So where we are right now is within the US. It's a tomato like any other tomato. It's of course really important that people don't take any of the any of the tomato or seeds outside of the US. And this is also true for any other tomatoes for phytosanitary reasons and a lot of other reasons. And so we are very careful to mark the tomato with terms and conditions saying this needs to stay in the US. I do want to comment, there's the regulations around our purple tomato that we have right now. There's also what's the regulatory landscape that governs products like ours. And there's a lot of companies right now that are working to bring new products to market, as you mentioned. I really have an eye towards 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. What is the regulatory scheme going to look like? I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. I think a lot about the world that they're going to live in. And I'm really interested in how this is evolving. So, I'm not fixated on the policy discussions of this year. We're a tiny little startup company. We have no ability to move the needle as far as lobbying for policy. The best we can do is bring a great product out and show, hey, people really want this. The regulatory policies don't come out of nowhere. These are a response to public perceptions and what the voters want their government to do. And so what I'm really interested in is let's have a conversation with the broad market, with the broad public in the country, and with voters and say, do you want this, yes or no? And to me, that's the best way that we get to regulatory change is actually, we start at the front.
Oh, very good. Well, we're speaking with Dr. Nathan Pumplin. He's the CEO of Norfolk Healthy Produce. This is the Talking Biotech podcast by Collabra. Oh, and I made a mistake. This isn't the first consumer-facing product, right? There was that pink pineapple. So here we go. And now we're back on the Talking Biotech podcast. We're speaking with Dr. Nathan Pumplin. He's the CEO of Norfolk Healthy Produce. And we're talking about the purple tomato. And let's turn to the technology side. You mentioned the Snapdragon gene earlier, but how are these purple tomatoes different as a tomato from cultivars like Cherokee Purple or Oregon Spring or some of the other ones that we sell at the farmer's market?
By and large, our tomatoes are just a tomato. And I want to emphasize that point, right? So this is Talking Biotech. We're talking about how biotech is different. Even more important is our tomatoes are tomatoes. Tomatoes have 35,000 genes, and our tomatoes have those genes like all other tomatoes. Now, the purple pigment in our tomatoes, it's the same purple pigment that's in an indigo rose, that's in a Cherokee purple. These are anthocyanins. These are the class of purple pigments that make blueberries blue, that make eggplants colored, that make blackberries colored. And the types of, there's about 600 different types of anthocyanins that can accumulate in plants. And the types in our tomatoes, they're all the same. The main difference is the ones developed through conventional breeding, like an indigo rose, these are activated by light. What that means is they're only synthesized in the skin, and they're only synthesized in tissue that has received a lot of light. So what this means is if you look at the tomato, usually the top will be a little bit purple and the bottom will be red. And then you cut it in half, you look inside, and it's all red. Our purple tomatoes, instead of being activated by light, they're activated by transcription factors that come from Snapdragon. Those transcription factors, and I'll get a little nerdy here, and I think from your listeners it's good. Those transcription factors are activated by a tomato promoter, which is activated itself during fruit ripening. So what that means is our purple pigment accumulates in response to development, in response to fruit ripening, not in response to environmental stimulus. So what this means is we get purple pigment accumulating throughout the whole fruit, and we get higher levels of the purple pigment. And so this is really, it's an important takeaway that this is a natural pigment that accumulates in tomatoes. We're accumulating more of it because we're doing it in response to development. But it's really a very natural process that we've augmented through this engineering approach.
Oh, very cool. Now, how is this actually achieved? You mentioned that it's an addition of a transcription factor from Snapdragon. So was this done by adding something with Agrobacterium, or how was that achieved?
Yep. So it was done by adding through Agrobacterium. And, again, most of your listeners are probably very familiar. Agrobacterium is a bacteria that evolved in nature to insert DNA into plants. So that's the way that it makes its living, so to speak. It reprograms cells of plants, so those plants make the food that it eats and makes a nice little home for it to live in. In the 1980s, biologists figured out what this process was purely through curiosity-driven research. Hey, this is really interesting, huh? Then they figured out, okay, we could take the DNA that's in Agrobacterium and we can put in DNA that's interesting to us and put that into plants. We use that nature-based process. That's what we did. And I should say that's what Kathy did in her lab about 18 years ago. One of the things that's really, really important, and you alluded to this earlier, people often come to us and say, oh, you're a biotechnology company. You do all this fancy genetic engineering. Well, really, we're plant breeders. And really what we do is very, very basic. Kathy inserted the DNA into a tomato about 18 years ago and showed that you could get a purple tomato. Since then, what we've been doing is conventional plant breeding. The same way that people have been doing for thousands of years. We've been crossing with different tomatoes. We've been growing out populations. We've been looking at genetic diversity. We've been looking at segregation of different traits that really matter so that we could get purple tomatoes that taste good, that grow well, that are resistant to diseases. And this is a problem that people have made in biotechnology so much. They say, hey, we have science, we have technology, we don't need plant breeding. That's kind of beneath us. And that's completely wrong. So biotechnology can be very powerful if it's in service of plant breeding, if it's in service of farmers, if it's in service of people who want to eat different foods. It doesn't work the other way around. And that's really been one of the cardinal sins I find in the history of developing products like this.
Yeah, I agree. I think too many folks who are in biotechnology have been such staunch advocates that they forget that adding a gene is a cherry on the sundae. You're talking about 35,000 genes. You're affecting one trait. And so if you don't have a good genetic background, what good is that one extra trait? And I think maybe that was part of the flavor saver problem. But going back to this particular innovation, what was the genetic background that is available, or what is the genetic background right now that's available if a consumer buys one of your tomato products?
Yeah, so the varieties that people buy are varieties that we developed. So these are
Oh,
new
okay.
varieties of tomatoes. The original tomato that was transformed is called microtom. And again, some of your listeners probably know this. This is a dwarf tomato. It grows very fast. It's very often used in lab because it's easy to work with. It's also been sent onto the International Space Station because if you want to grow something in space, this is a compact plant. It's the easiest to do. It is not commercially valuable in any kind of a way. They don't produce a lot of tomatoes. These are not tomatoes that you want to eat. And so for the last 18 years, what we've been doing is crossing that tomato with different types of commercially useful tomatoes to get now this new variety and a portfolio of new varieties that have good flavor, that have good production, that have good plant architecture, that have disease resistance. And so that's really the main part of what we do at Norfolk Healthy Produce. We onboard tomato germplasm, we make a bunch of crosses, we grow them out, and we evaluate what works and what doesn't. And again, for those people who may be thinking about applying biotechnology to develop products, it's often framed as what genetic background did you use to put it in? And that's simply it betrays a misunderstanding of how plant breeding works and how new varieties are developed. You never put it in a background and it's done. You're always going to have to create genetic diversity and do evaluations. It's all about diversity and selection, and that's what we've been doing.
Well, that's pretty exciting that you've been breeding your own cultivars that contain this gene. But, Florida presents some unique problems that really we've required tomatoes in Florida to be bred specifically for Florida with certain resistances, etc. And have you bred it into any of those backgrounds?
So we're breeding it into a few different backgrounds that are our top areas for releasing commercial varieties. So we have two areas that we're specifically focused on breeding for. One is high-tech greenhouse production. That is where the majority of fresh market tomatoes come from. If you go to a grocery store and you buy tomatoes, this is by and large where the bulk of them are coming from in the US. The other is processing tomatoes. I'm based here in Davis, California. We're in the middle of the main production area for tomatoes that go into shelf-stable products. And this is an area that has a really big opportunity to deliver anthocyanin nutrients to people in a way that's cost effective. So those are two of the top targets we're breeding for. And naturally, you need a whole host of traits of attributes in those varieties. We are working a little bit with material that's adapted to Florida. We're also working with material that's adapted to open field production or low tech, high tunnel production in the Northeast, in the Midwest. And we're doing that both through work that we're doing within the company and collaborations with other breeders that are operating in the US.
One of the things I've learned about the process is that individuals who get the seeds from you are not allowed to sell the seeds or the products. So why is that kind of policy in place?
So there's two main reasons that when we sell seeds to home gardeners, we have the policy that there's no commercial rights with those seeds. The first is the purple tomato, as we're launching it, is really a premium product. It's a proprietary product that we developed, and we're working to make sure that the product that gets to consumers is really a fantastic one that delights consumers. So we work with farmers and nurseries on a commercial license model basis. And I encourage anyone who's listening to this, who's interested to sell fruit, to sell seedlings, to reach out to us at our website. You can see very easily the instructions for how to become a licensed grower. We would love to work with you. We have a lot of growers we're working with already to get products out into markets, out into the hands of consumers and in the plates of consumers. The other reason is because the purple tomato is bioengineered, there's a certain set of restrictions around moving the material, and we want to make sure that we can convey that message with fidelity. And so this helps us by having those terms and conditions for the home gardeners. This helps make it clear that these tomatoes need to stay in the US. We do encourage gardeners to share tomatoes, share seedlings with their communities, with their family, with their friends. This is obviously an important cornerstone part of being a gardener, and we very much encourage that. And I do want to throw out one of our inspirations for this model is the Grateful Dead and the taping of concerts and the trading of those tapes. And we see a direct connection of gardeners saving seeds, trading the seeds with their friends. You know, we encourage the responsible use of that as long as they're following the conditions.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So the company is Norfolk Healthy Produce, not Norfolk Healthy Tomatoes. So I'm assuming that there is other opportunities in the pipeline for other fruits and vegetables. So what else is going to be purple in the near future?
So it's a great question. We always get this. There's a few purple things we're working on. The top of the list is purple peppers. This is kind of the no-brainer. And we're very, very focused right now in the company of getting better types of purple tomatoes out onto the market and making sure that we really have a solid foundation with the purple tomato portfolio. From there, we take a step back and we say, you know, we're not the purple tomato company, we're not the purple company, and we're also not the GMO company. We are a company that is a leading voice in the conversation around how are we using technology to make our farming systems better? How are we using technology to make our food better? What is it that people actually want? And so we're actually at the point of doing a lot of listening, right? This is not for scientists to say, we want to push this out into the world. We now have a wonderful opportunity to listen to people who like purple tomatoes and ask them, hey, what else would you like? You know, what are the other things that you would like? And what we hear is people really want foods that deliver better nutrition, right? And there's all sorts of things that fit into people's lives. People want more sustainable foods. They want less food waste. And so people will say, for instance, could you give me a tomato that has longer shelf life, that delivers vitamin D, that delivers omega-3 fatty acids, that delivers vitamin A? These are the kind of things that people are interested in. And we are interested in delivering. And so a lot of these can be done not with biotechnology traits, but with conventional breeding. And we have this very unique opportunity. We're a little weird. We're not afraid of doing something different. And so we can launch products onto the market that a typical seed company wouldn't be able to launch because they don't fit into the established mold. And so, I'll be really proud if 5 years, 10 years, we have another conversation and you say, boy, Norfolk Healthy Produce is the company that's able to launch these products that seem very weird and very strange and very fringe. And oh my gosh, they move into the mainstream because it turns out that's something that a lot of consumers really want. And that want and desire wasn't recognized by the mainstream market.
Well, you're talking a lot about how the company is different and the philosophy is different. The products are cool. It seems like a place where a lot of people would say, if I'm going to have a career in biotechnology, I want to work for a place like that. So if you had some advice for students or postdocs that were studying in biotechnology who might want to maybe tailor their resume to fit in a place like Norfolk Healthy Produce, what should they do?
It's an excellent question, Kevin. And I love the question. I need to preface it and say, I am here thanks to dozens of phenomenal mentors and advisors and coaches and colleagues that I've worked with over the last 20 years. And I'm forever grateful to all of these people, and all I can do is pay it forward. So I would say a few kernels of advice. One, ask questions, be very curious, take initiative, don't be shy. If you don't understand something or if you come across something new, pull that thread, chase it down, ask people, question. The other thing is get domain expertise, get specialization, but don't get too focused too narrowly on one area. I think it's really important to understand context. And so, for instance, get really good at biotechnology, understand molecular biology, but don't think that that's all you need to know. Understand how that fits into breeding, understand how that fits into farming, understand how that fits into commerce. That I think is really important to have people who can go a bit broad. And then the last thing, and this is, someone who's studying biotechnology. When I was a student, there were things called the soft skills. You've got to learn the science, you've got to do the experiments, and sometimes there's this leadership stuff or there's this teamwork stuff, and it sounds like a lot of hooey. I used to think this. It's really important for students to understand how groups of people work together. How can you come to a group with a ton of humility, with an attitude that says, how can we have the emergent output of the group do better? What is it going to take? And I think students who pick that up, and again, I'm so grateful for people who kind of open my eyes and open my mind and open my heart to these directions. This is extremely valuable. People who can build bridges, people who can look at and say, okay, if we're going to succeed at biotechnology at this new product, we need a lot of people to come together and do a lot of things really, really well. And that only works if you have a cohesive group of people coming together. And so there's tons of resources and tons of tools out there. And for those students and people earlier in their career, you cannot overinvest in that, I promise you.
No, very good. I find that soft skills can sometimes be the hardest.
Indeed.
And I know so many scientists over the years, I'm sure you've met them too, where if they would have had a little bit better soft skills, their careers would have been probably very different. And I don't need to name names, but
it takes a village. It takes a village, and so we need all different types of people. And I think what's really fun in science is you see that.
Yeah, very good. Well, if people want to learn more about purple tomato, or if they want to maybe order some seeds, how do they do it?
So really easy to find us. Look up on Google Norfolk Healthy Produce. You'll get to our website very soon. There's a product page where you can order our seeds. So I do need to say our 2025 seed sales are underway right now. The next 2 months is really when most people are thinking about planting their gardens. So please do check out our website for that. If you're interested in growing seedlings for sale or tomatoes for sale, you can find the information to become a licensed grower. We are on social media, mostly on Instagram and Facebook. You'll find that under Big Purple Tomato. And there's also links to that in our website. Our website has a ton of information also on the science that went into the product, frequently asked questions, and If you'd like to learn more, please don't hesitate. Reach out to us. We respond to everyone at least once, and we love to hear feedback. We love to hear questions and really understand, what everyone out there is thinking.
Very good. Well, usually I would quit here, but I'll ask you one more question. And do you think we really have turned a corner with respect to the dreaded GMO specter?
Yes. And I think the important thing is, what do you mean by we? So the general public really doesn't care. And I think that's the important thing to remember. Most people in the public, they don't care if they're eating a GMO or not. What they care is it a better product? And is this good for my family? And can I afford it? And is it going to go bad after I buy it? And so I think it's really important that we are clear on who it is that we're serving. Why do we get up in the morning and go to work? And whose lives are we trying to make better? And are we really performing a generous act? And is this benefiting people? And so, yes, absolutely. We're at the point where there's products out on the market that people are choosing, right? People have a choice and they're choosing the pink pineapple. They're choosing the purple tomato. It's going to take a few years for this really to play out and build momentum. What we're seeing very clearly is there's a ton of momentum. It's much more than anyone expected. And now, we get to keep telling the story. We get to keep developing products and build and make progress.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Nathan. I really appreciate it and look forward to seeing you here in Gainesville in a couple of weeks.
I look forward to being there, Kevin, and meeting in person. Thanks a bunch.
Yeah, this is great. And so anyone listening, make sure that you're ordering some seeds. They're available on the website and you can grow your own, which you can use to educate people in your network, showing them through your social media. They're dazzling tomatoes. They look great in a salad. I grew some last year. But you can use them to educate your network and familiarize people with the idea of technology that if you can increase the amount of healthy compounds in a tomato, imagine what else you could do as we could expand this technology into other opportunities. And that's why we're here at the Talking Biotech podcast to communicate about ways we can help people and the planet with biotechnology. Thank you for listening to the Talking Biotech podcast by Collabra, and we'll talk to you again next week.